Have you ever noticed that the people who change the most, those who go through deep and real transformations, rarely feel the need to tell the world what happened, while some make a point of announcing every step of their new life to everyone, like if they needed a stage? Those who truly get their lives on track usually do so in silence. It's not an empty silence, it's a silence charged with meaning. It's the silence of those who do not need applause, of those who do not seek approval in the social media showcase social. It is the silence of those who understand that true change does not happen under the spotlight, but in the most intimate backstage of the soul. Gustav Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology, realized something that still defies logic today. Genuine transformation is invisible at first. It begins where no one sees, where you don't even like to look. It's not about rearranging the room, adjusting the schedule, or putting life in order only on the outside. It's about face the internal chaos and understand that it shapes all the chaos that appears in outside. How many times have you tried to change, starting from the surface, bought a new notebook to write down goals, joined the gym, downloaded an app to track habits, and still gave up weeks later? This is because, as Jung revealed, changing from the outside in is like painting a moldy wall without treating the damp. The appearance improves for a short time, but the problem returns. The first, major. The lesson Jung leaves us is as simple as it is revolutionary. Change, true life, is born in silence. It doesn't need hashtags, ready-made phrases, or witnesses to validate. In fact, when we feel a strong need to announce our plans, this could be a warning. It's possible that deep down transformation has not yet truly happened. Science confirms what Jung already knew it. Talking too much about your goals can sabotage motivation. When you share a plan, you get a small dose of social approval that tricks the brain into thinking the goal has already been accomplished. It's like laughing before the end of a joke. The impact is lost. The patients who have made the most progress in Jung's therapies were not the most vocal about their changes. They were the who worked quietly, without trying to impress anyone, willing to face each other head-on, without filters, without worry about making your journey beautiful for others. Think about how many times have you ever said you would start a diet, join the gym, or create a new habit. How many of these promises actually lasted? It's possible that in some of them, the announcement was more exciting than the execution itself. And here it is important to make it clear, the silence of transformation is not isolation or a sick secret. It is an intimate pact between you and your soul. A pact that requires time, care, and maturation, away from the pressure of showing results to the world. When you decide to change without the need to announce it, something changes at the root. Your motivation stops being about pleasing and starts being about answering an internal call. And yes, maybe one day you'll share your story, but when that happens, it will be as true inspiration. No, as a search for validation. Jung said, that which does not become conscious becomes manifests as destiny. When you change in silence, you begin to write the own destiny, instead of living hostage to the expectations and judgments of others. This process also requires humility, because it recognizes that change takes time, that there will be stumbles and restarts, and that by keeping the process private, you give yourself the right to make mistakes and try again, without having to explain yourself to no one. If you really want to get your life on track, make a commitment silent with yourself. Don't tell anyone, don't publish, just begin. Work every day, even if only a little, towards the person you want to be. Jung said that the most difficult conquest is that of oneself, and however, we spend energy trying to conquer people, status, or possessions, and we forget to master what really matters. Our own inner world. Conquering yourself isn't about becoming cold or repressing emotions. It's about knowing them so well that you can choose how to react instead of being dragged by them, is to assume the helm of one's own life instead of being a passenger in a boat carried by the wind. But most people live on autopilot, react without thinking, act according to patterns that you don't even realize you carry. How many times have you caught yourself saying, "I don't know why I did that," or "Was it not my intention to react like that?" This happens because there is a part of us that, even invisible, is in command. Before try to tidy up the house, improve relationships, or advance in your career, it is necessary to descend into the depths of the psyche and face what has been repressed or denied. This takes courage. Courage. To admit that maybe you're not exactly who you are, believes to be. Courage to recognize that there are parts of you that you don't like, but that still influence your decisions. And here at Unshakable Mindset Channel, this is the journey we will take together. A journey that is not about shortcuts or empty promises, but about building real change from the inside out. Because when you understand that almost all of your external problems have internal roots, the game changes forever. Maybe you've never stopped to think about it, but how many of your decisions today are guided by a sense of inadequacy that you carry for years? How many times have you tried to change what was around you, the house, the job, relationships, and only later did you realize that nothing seemed really resolve itself? Jung observed this countless times. People who, they arrived at the office believing that the problem was out there in external circumstances and discovered that the real work was to transform their relationship with themselves. And interestingly, when this internal transformation began, the external world seemed to reorganize itself almost as a natural consequence. The conquest of oneself, it's not a finish line. There is no definitive end point, but there are clear milestones along this journey. One of them is when you stop judge yourself and start observing yourself with curiosity, without criticism, just trying to understand. Another is when you start to recognize your patterns automatic before being dragged by them. And a third, perhaps the most liberating, is when you realize that you can consciously choose how to respond to a situation rather than simply react. It was at this point that Jung brought to light a concept that for many is as uncomfortable as transformer, the shadow. The shadow is everything you are but deny being. It is the invisible repository of all aspects of your personality that have been rejected, repressed, or considered unacceptable. From an early age, we learn what is permitted and what is condemned. If you grew up in a home that extolled kindness, perhaps learned to hide its natural aggressiveness. If you came from a competitive environment, it's possible that have banished your sensitivity. If you had parents who valued only reason, may have learned to distrust your own emotions. But there's a problem. These parts don't disappear just because they're denied. They remain alive, acting behind the scenes, influencing decisions, sabotaging plans, creating conflicts that you don't even understand where they come from. Want a simple example? Think that person who irritates you deeply and you can't even explain why. Jung would say that they probably is reflecting a part of you that you refuse to see. The lazy person bothers those who have never allowed themselves to rest. The arrogant provokes those who denied his own greatness. The impulsive person bothers those who live suffocated by their own rigidity. And here is a powerful revelation. The shadow not only holds what we consider bad, it also hides talents and potential that we fail to develop. Jung called this the gold in the shadow. How often have you ever said that you are not the type of person to do something, when in fact a part of you has always wanted to try? If you've always seen yourself as a goody two-shoes, there is a vibrant spontaneity in its shadow. If you have always considered yourself a rebel, perhaps there is a discipline there, transformer waiting to be used. If you have lived trapped in reason, it is possible that your intuition is hidden right where you least look. Working with the shadow does not mean embracing destructive behaviors. Means recovering lost parts of yourself, integrating them consciously and maturity. It's about stopping wasting psychic energy trying to repress what it's natural. When this work begins, something incredible happens. You design less in others. That automatic irritation with certain people decreases because you begin to recognize these traits in yourself. More compassion emerges for yourself and others. The energy that was once used to maintain a prison internal begins to release like a muscle finally relaxing. And this recovered energy can be used to create, love, build, live in a way more authentic. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious is why the path to a full life inevitably involves encountering one's own shadow." But this is one of Jung's most uncomfortable revelations. What you tries to bury within itself does not disappear. On the contrary, it becomes an enemy silent inner self, capable of sabotaging the best opportunities in your life. The psychic energy we use to keep certain aspects of our personality locked away does not remain inactive. It turns against ourselves, creating patterns of self-sabotage that seem inexplicable. How many times have you been faced with an incredible opportunity and almost mysterious, did something that ruined everything? How many times have you come close to an important goal and suddenly lost motivation or made a mistake simple that committed months of effort? How many times did you promise that this time it would be different and yet it repeated the same cycle? For Jung, this is a direct result of repression. When we deny natural parts of who we are, we create a tension between the image we show to the world and our true self-nature. This tension needs to find an outlet, and often it manifests as behaviors that defeat our own plans. Imagine someone who learned from an early age that good people don't feel anger. This person represses his aggression, dress yourself in constant kindness, strive to always be understanding, but the anger doesn't go away, it builds up. And when that person is about to achieve something important, this pent-up energy can emerge as a panic attack, a depressive episode, or a passive-aggressive attitude that alienates important allies. Or think of someone who grew up hearing that they shouldn't stand out so as not to bother others. When it begins to prosper, something within her pulls her back. Procrastination arises in decisive projects, sabotage of supportive relationships, to physical symptoms that prevent you from moving forward. The shadow is the most honest mirror we have, and also the most uncomfortable. But facing it is the only way to recover the pieces that complete us. And here at Mentalidad Inabalable, our goal is precisely this: help you stop living half your life in the light and half hidden in the darkness. Because when you integrate all that you are, including what you've tried to deny for years, you begin to live with full strength, and that strength changes everything. The unconscious, as Jung observed, is a true master in the art of sabotage. He doesn't come with warnings clear, it acts through the shadows, psychosomatic illnesses that arise precisely at decisive moments, small accidents repeated on the eve of an important step, relationship patterns that mysteriously always end in similar and destructive ways. Most of the time, we don't even realize that we ourselves are the authors of this sabotage. It is much easier to blame bad luck, circumstances, or even other people than facing the fact that there is something hidden inside us, working against our goals conscious. Chronic procrastination, for example, is rarely just laziness. It's often fear. Fear of being seen, fear of failing, of surprising, even to be successful, paralyzing perfectionism, the kind that prevents you from finishing what you start, almost always hides an old wound, the feeling that nothing you do will ever be good enough. Addictions, resentments that never dissolve, toxic relationships repeated like an endless cycle. All of this may have roots in aspects of ourselves that were denied and who now fight for recognition. And here's the point. The way out is not in fight, ardor against these patterns. In fact, this only increases repression and consequently sabotage. The solution, as Jung taught, is to make conscious or unconscious, identify which parts of us are being excluded and start an internal dialogue, honest, respectful and consistent with them. A common mistake is to believe that working with the shadow means releasing all repressed impulses without filter, as if it were valid to act according to any emotion that arises. Jung was clear. Integrating is not surrendering to dark aspects, but recognizing them, understanding them, and learning to channel your energy in a mature way. It's as if you become an internal diplomat, mediating peace between different parties without letting anyone take over control in a destructive way. Take repressed aggression as an example. Ignored, it can turn into resentment or self-sabotage. Silent, integrated, however, it reveals itself as an energy of protection and affirmation, personal. When you recognize it, you can use it to set firm boundaries, defend what you believe in, and put strength into projects that require determination. The same energy that was once an enemy becomes an ally. The same goes for who has always denied his own desire for recognition because he considers it superficial. These people often sabotage themselves at the very moment they are about to receive praise or positive attention, adopting a false modesty that, in deep down, it hurts self-esteem. When this aspect is integrated, one realizes that being seen and appreciated is a legitimate human need, and that when recognized and balanced, it can become fuel to express true potential. Integrated, this energy can manifest as healthy care for one's own appearance, legitimate pride in one's achievements, and the ability to receiving compliments without the discomfort that used to make you cringe. It's letting to hide and allow its natural light to expand. Jung pointed out something transformative. When we embrace and integrate what was previously repressed, we don't become worse, we become more whole. We gain authenticity and, paradoxically, more ethical. This happens because the energy that was previously spent fighting against ourselves, it begins to be channeled consciously, strengthening our actions in the world. This process gives rise to a phenomenon that Jung called it natural authority. When you stop denying parts of yourself, acquires a firm, true presence that others perceive, even without knowing it. Explain why. It is a quiet confidence that conveys security and stability. At the same time, integration develops what Jung described as transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites within, of having to choose between them. You discover that you can be kind and firm, humble and confident, rational and intuitive. This ability to embrace paradoxes is a clear sign of psychological maturity. The path to integration usually goes through 4 phases. First, recognition, admitting that characteristic is part of you. Then acceptance, stop punishing yourself for it existing. Then understanding, discovering what positive function this energy can perform. And finally, mature expression, finding constructive and healthy ways of put it into practice. For Jung, this is the process of individuation, becoming who you really are, instead of living as a shadow of what the world expects. And he was direct. Everything that irritates us in others can lead us to an understanding, deep insight into ourselves. Therefore, self-observation becomes the tool more powerful to integrate the shadow. But it is not just any observation. It is a constant observation, almost scientific, but filled with compassion. It is watching the own standards with the same interest with which an archaeologist examines the remains of a lost civilization. One of the Jung's central technique was to observe projections. Whenever you feel intense irritation, disproportionately disliked by someone, ask yourself, what exactly about this person bothers me? Where does this same trait exist in me, even if hidden or denied? This question can be uncomfortable, but it is liberating. The falseness we see in others can reflect the falsehood we deny in ourselves. The laziness we condemn may be the echo of our own desire for rest, stifled by the obligation to always be active. And it is precisely at this point that here at Mentalidade Inabalável, we want to provoke you. How many of your external battles are actually disguised internal battles? Answering this could change everything. Integrating the shadow is not just an abstract concept. It is a practical, daily, almost artisanal task. Jung said that it is not enough to understand intellectually. It is necessary to create habits of observation and dialogue with your own unconscious. It's as if, little by little, you learn to speak the language that your deepest psyche has always tried to use to communicate with you. One of the most powerful tools for this is the Diary of Shadow. Take a few minutes a day to record moments of irritation, perceived falsehood, repressed impulses and emotions that you judged as inappropriate. But be careful. Don't write to punish yourself, but to investigate. Become a scientist of his own mind, examining every sensation as if observing a rare phenomenon. For example, today, I got irritated when so-and-so interrupted me in the meeting. As you write, ask yourself why this bothered me so much. Is there a part of me that would like to interrupt more, to position more firmly, but who remains silent out of excessive politeness? This type of questioning opens doors that were previously locked. Jung also used a practice called amplification. When identifying an emotional pattern recurring, don't run away from it. Explore it to the fullest. Ask when it started. What triggers activate it? How does it manifest in the body? What old memories does it awake? The more layers you peel back, the clearer it becomes. What the unconscious is trying to show. Another valuable technique is daydream observation. Allow your mind wander without direction, without trying to control, and just observe the images and fantasies that arise. Often, these contents reveal messages that the conscious mind cannot formulate and does not ignore the slips of the tongue. That word that slips out, the repeated mistake, the forgetfulness, always the same. None of this is completely accidental. They are small gaps through which the unconscious manifests itself. When pay attention, you begin to realize that you are surrounded by clues, like a detective who finally finds the breadcrumbs that lead him to the main scene. An essential exercise is the internal dialogue. When you notice a repressed aspect, for example, anger, you don't try to expel it. Ask yourself, what do you want to show me? What are you trying to protect myself? How can I use your strength without becoming destructive? This approach completely changes the relationship with parts that were previously seen as enemies. The key for Jung was to suspend judgment. You don't observe to fix yourself immediately, but to know yourself deeply. Because, as he said, it is not possible to change what remains unconscious. This is patient work, almost like that of an archaeologist, who removes layers by layer of sediment until a precious artifact is revealed. And as we cultivate this self-observation, something almost magical happens. There arise choices where, before there were only automatic reactions. For Jung, one of the key's most powerful way to deepen this process is in dreams. He called it of the royal road to the unconscious. the symbolic language by which the psyche communicates more deeply, offering warnings, directions, and insights that logical mind could never create on its own. Ignoring dreams is like having a wise master whispering advice in your ear, and yet you choose not to. Unlike the linear logic of the waking state, dreams move. Through metaphors, associations, and images that do not obey the rules of time or causality. Dreaming that you are flying is rarely about literally flying. It can be about breaking free from a situation that imprisons or transcends an internal limit. Dreaming that is lost can reflect a real confusion, a lack of direction that you live day to day. Jung realized that dreams often make up for it, our attitude. Conscious. If during the day we are excessively rational, at night, emotional and chaotic, images can arise. If we are too submissive, we can dream that we are assertive or even aggressive. It is as if the unconscious seeks the balance, correcting the excesses of the personality that we show to the world. To get closer to this language, Jung recommended keeping a dream diary. Leave a notebook next to your bed, and as soon as you wake up, write down everything you remember, even fragments. They evaporate quickly, like mist in the sun. Recording immediately is essential. At first, notes may be vague or rare, but the uniric memory is strengthened with practice and, mainly, with genuine interest. When the unconscious realizes that you are listening, it begins to speak more clearly. When writing, record not only the events, but also the emotions, colors, figures, and the general atmosphere of the dream. Often, the emotional climate is more revealing than the narrative itself. In interpretation, Jung universal meanings. He preferred amplification, exploring the that-each. Symbol represents specifically for the dreamer. A snake, for example, can be a threat to some, fascination for others, renewal for still others. The question is not what means in the dictionary, but what does it mean in my story? He also noticed that dreams can anticipate future movements, not as predictions literal, but as signs of the direction the psyche is taking. Dreams' recurring symptoms indicate urgent, unresolved issues. Nightmares, however disturbing, can carry vital messages. The monster that scares can be a rejected part of you, asking for recognition. A useful practice is dialogue with dream characters. Choose a dream figure, person, animal, or even object. And in imagination ask, who are you? What represents? What do you want to show me? This interaction can reveal meanings unexpected. Jung reported cases of artists, scientists who found solutions creative through dreams. He even recommended asking for guidance before sleep when faced with a dilemma. And as we will see later, this dialogue between the internal and external world also manifests itself in what Jung called its synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences that seem challenge common logic, but for those who learn to listen to their own psyche, start to make sense. And here at Unshakable Mindset, I want you to understand, if you start paying attention to the signals your mind sends, path stops being random and starts to align with who you really are. There is something in our daily lives that often goes unnoticed, but Jung called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem defy any logic of chance. It is not about superstition or magic, but about a subtle connection between what happens inside us and what manifests in external world. It's as if somehow the universe confirms what was already we are deeply sorry. Imagine you think about changing careers, and at the same time one day you find a song that talks about new beginnings. You read a text about transitions professionals and even receives a call from a friend who has just taken the same decision. Everything seems to conspire to reinforce his intuition. For Jung, this is not mere chance. It is a deep alignment between the unconscious and the external events. a kind of confirmation that you are about to touch your own inner truth. These signs do not arise by coincidence. They intensify in times of change, when we are already in touch with our essence, but we still hesitate on the next step. It's as if the unconscious, realizing our resistance, organize the world around us to show us the right direction in an indirect but persuasive way. Jung observed that the more we deepening, the more the external world seems to respond. The boundaries between inside and outside are beginning to appear more permeable than we imagined. It is not magical thinking, but rather the result of expanded perception. Attention awakens to patterns and signals that always were all around us, but we never knew how to notice. He called this posture of floating observation, being attentive but without rigidity, capturing the subtleties that connect internal and external events. It's like learning a word new. Suddenly you start hearing it everywhere. It's always been there. Now you have simply learned to perceive. A practical way to exercise this sensitivity is keeping a diary of synchronicities. Write down any coincidences that catch your eye, even if at the moment they seem insignificant or meaningless. Meaning. Over time, patterns reveal themselves. Certain types of synchronicity can always precede important changes or intensify when you are more aligned with your inner truth. But Jung warned us, don't confuse synchronicity with superstition. Not every coincidence has deep meaning. The difference lies in the internal resonance. One true synchronicity touches you in an almost physical way, as if a string invisible was vibrated within your being. It can manifest itself through people who appear at the right time, chance encounters that change completely your perspective, or books and messages that arrive exactly when you need. For Jung, these coincidences are evidence of an organizing intelligence operating in the fabric of life, not supernatural, but a deep connection between the psyche and reality. Realize these synchronicities transform the way you relate to life. Let a feeling that you walk alone and begin to trust that something bigger is working in parallel to your efforts. But be careful. This does not mean passively waiting for the signs. It means acting on your inner truth, remaining receptive to the confirmations or redirects that may arise. It's a delicate balance between personal initiative and openness to the greater forces of life. What Jung described it as the harmony between conscious action and signals from the unconscious. Often these synchronicities appear to confirm that you are on the right path, even if it seems risky or illogical to the rational mind. It is as if the unconscious collective mobilize to support those who have the courage to live by according to his true calling. The legacy Jung left us is simple and profound. Organizing your life isn't about organizing drawers or creating perfect routines. It's make peace with who we really are, including the parts we try to hide or deny. This path offers no quick fixes, but a transformation that is rooted in essence. It is not about becoming an improved version of yourself, but to rediscover who you always were before of other people's masks and expectations. True courage is not about displaying only virtues, but in integrating contradictions and disagreements in the very wholeness. When we stop fighting ourselves, we release an energy that was previously trapped, and with it comes clarity, presence, and power of action. It is not, I need perfection to begin with. I don't need to have all the answers or prove nothing to anyone. It takes honesty with yourself and a willingness to look inward. The silence Jung speaks of is not a hiding place, but the space where inner truth matures before being offered to the world. If these words awakened something in you, if you recognized yourself in repeated patterns, or felt that there is a more authentic version of yourself waiting to emerge, the moment is now. Don't wait for Monday or next year. Start today, discreetly. Grab a notebook and write down an irritation you felt today. Ask yourself what shadow she reveals. Observe your dreams in the coming days and notice the coincidences that arise. Every small gesture is a profound step towards who you are, it really is. And if you want to continue this journey of self-knowledge and transformation, subscribe to the Unshakable Mindset channel. Here we will explore together these layers of the human mind, understanding ourselves' shadow, and learn to live aligned with our deepest essence. When you start to really observe yourself, you realize that transformation is not something that needs to be announced or validated by others. It is silent, discreet, but intense. Every small internal change has effects that few are reflected in your external life, and it is precisely in this silence that you find the true strength to reinvent yourself. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it too. Leave a comment with the insight that touched your heart the most, and subscribe to Mentalidade Inabalável to continue this journey of self-knowledge and transformation. But remember, true change doesn't start with what the world sees. It starts with who you are. The world doesn't need the version you pretend to be. It needs what it really is. When you stop hiding from yourself, you begin a process profound that Jung would call a silent transformation. At first, she is almost invisible. There are no fireworks, big announcements, or changes, abrupt movements that someone can point out. But inside, a continuous movement happens, like roots that go deep into the earth before any shoot emerges to the surface. Jung understood that this subterranean phase is vital. Just as a seed needs to germinate in the darkness to become a tree, the human being needs reorganize your internal world before sustaining any external change of lasting form. It is in this process that moments of discomfort arise. As layers of old conditioning begin to fall away, the mind can feel like you're losing ground. Old patterns, even harmful ones, carry a sense of familiarity that the unconscious associates with security. Abandoning them is like dropping a rotten plank into the open sea. No matter how fragile, she seemed to keep you afloat. This is where persistence becomes essential. Jung said that there is no growth without tension between what we were and what we are becoming. This tension, when held patiently, becomes the force that shapes a new internal structure. Another element. The fascinating thing that emerges along this path is the relationship between shadow and creativity. Often, the energies we repress contain immense creative potential. Repressed anger can be transformed into courage to defend ideas. Sadness chronicled can become artistic sensitivity. The need for recognition can turn into inspiration to create something that impacts positively other people. By integrating the shadow, we unlock resources that were previously dormant, waiting for permission to manifest themselves. External life begins to reflect this change in an almost imperceptible way. Small, different decisions, more authentic conversations, choices that benefit real well-being and not just the appearance of success. People who before took up a lot of emotional space can naturally move away, and new connections more aligned appear with lightness. It is as if your internal field begins to emit a different frequency, attracting experiences more consistent with who you really are. The concept of central individualization in Jung's thought does not mean isolation. It means develop a mature relationship with the world. When we stop living only to meet external expectations, we interact more honestly. It's not the absence of conflict, but the ability to deal with disagreements without losing internal integrity. It is at this point that natural authority arises, not as an imposition, but as a stable presence that inspires confidence. Working with dreams and synchronicities deepens with the time. We begin to notice that certain symbols repeat themselves, that certain images appear just when we are about to face important choices. A recurring animal in dreams can represent an inner force that needs to be recognized. A repeating scenario can symbolize aspects of life that still require transformation. At the same time, synchronicities begin to form a kind of dialogue with reality. A book, a phrase, or a casual conversation can answer questions that we have not even formulated verbally, but that were latent in us, our heart. This new way of living requires constant practice of self-listening. Instead of reacting automatically, we learn to pause. Pausing is a sacred place where we can consciously choose the direction of our energy. Jung emphasized that freedom, true power, is born from this ability to choose and not to act on impulse. Once we interrupt an automatic pattern and choose a response aligned with our essence, we strengthen the new internal structure we are building. The result of this work is not just individual. People who integrate their shadow and recognize their complexity become agents of change in any environment they occupy. Your presence breaks collective patterns of reactivity and judgment. By acting with consciousness, show without speeches that another way of living is possible. This silent influence is perhaps one of the greatest forces of social transformation. Jung believed that collective healing begins with the individual becoming whole. It is not about convincing or preach, but to embody the change we wish to see. That is why silence, far from being passivity, it is the fertile ground where the most action is prepared, powerful, one that is born from within and sustains itself throughout life. As you progress on the journey of individuation, life ceases to be just a sequence of tasks and become a constant dialogue between the conscious and unconscious self. Each challenge, every encounter, every coincidence carries the opportunity to broaden your understanding of yourself and the world. In this state, it is no longer necessary to desperately search for signs or answers. They simply appear in the natural rhythm of the path because you are already living accordingly with your deepest truth. As the path deepens, it becomes inevitable to confront the role that culture and environment play in the formation of our shadows. From an early age, we absorb explicit messages and subtle about what is acceptable or unacceptable, shaping behaviors to be accepted. This adaptation, although necessary to survive socially, it often exacts a high price, the loss of connection with authentic parts of ourselves. By reclaiming these parts, we are not rejecting the society, but learning to participate in it without sacrificing our integrity. Awareness of this cultural conditioning broadens our perception. Many internal conflicts are not only personal, but echo collective dilemmas. The repressed aggression, for example, may reflect not only family dynamics, but also a social context that devalues assertiveness. Hidden sensitivity can be a result of environments that exalt reason and despise emotional expression. By recognizing these influences, we understand that working with the shadow is also an act of silent cultural transformation. Each individual who becomes whole contributes to breaking collective patterns, enriching the world around them. This perspective leads us to see archetypes more deeply. They are not just images internal, but forces that manifest themselves in myths, stories, and symbols that span generations. The hero, the sage, the rebel, the caretaker, the destroyer, all live within us in different proportions. Integrating the shadow means allow these archetypes to act in a balanced way, preventing any one of them from dominating life unilaterally. Too much of the hero can lead to exhaustion and excessive pride. Too much of the caregiver, personal annulment. The excess of the permanent rebel at this point, the contact with symbolic narratives, whether ancient myths, fairy tales, or contemporary stories, becomes a powerful instrument of self-knowledge. When we see ourselves reflected in the characters, we perceive nuances of our own psyche, which previously passed unnoticed. Jung observes that stories that span centuries do so because they touch universal structures of human experience. Reading, watching, or listening to these narratives with symbolic attention is, therefore, a way of mirroring one's own internal process. The practice of observe what awakens intense emotions in works of art, music, or situations. Everyday life also works as a tool for exploring the shadow. A painting that disturbs, a song that provokes nostalgia, a film that awakens unexpected tears. All are portals to deep inner layers. The key is to ask, what exactly touches me here? What memory, desire, or fear is being activated? This investigation does not seek definitive answers, but deepens the connection with the unconscious. At the same time, the body remains an indispensable ally in this process. Postures, muscle tensions, breathing patterns, and physiological reactions function as mirrors of the internal state. The work of integration benefits from body practices that increase awareness sensory. Mindful walking, free movements, deep breathing. These practices create bridges between the mental and physical world, allowing that sights are not restricted to the intellect, but are incorporated into the living experience. Another aspect that intensifies is the relationship with time. The constant acceleration imposed by modern life often prevents the internal transformation matures. Jung understood that psychic processes, deep ones, have a rhythm of their own, and forcing them is like trying to open a button of flower before its time. The result is always the loss of that which could have fully blossomed. Learning to respecting internal time, even when the world demands immediate results, is an act of resistance and self-care. This respect for the internal rhythm also changes the way we deal with setbacks. Moments of stagnation, relapses in old patterns, or periods of confusion are not signs of failure, but natural processes of the growth cycle. The psyche, like nature, moves in spirals, revisits themes, deepens understandings, and returns to points previous ones from new perspectives. Recognizing this trap of self-criticism excessive and strengthens the patience needed to sustain changes lasting. With practice, we learn to transform everyday life into a self-knowledge laboratory. Small, trivial conversations, frustrations, repetitive tasks. Everything can be used as a tool to observe patterns, understand emotions, and integrate aspects of the shadow. Each moment becomes an opportunity for evolution. Each choice is a chance to aligning behavior and essence. And if you want to continue exploring these deep layers of the human mind and behavior, be sure to subscribe to the Mentalidade channel, Unshakable. Here we will discover together how small internal changes reverberate in the external world and how you can live with more integrity, authenticity, and powerful. Along this path, every experience, every interaction, and every challenge becomes a mirror to perceive automatic reactions, allowing investigate what they really reveal about who we are. This approach dissolves the separation between external life and internal work, transforming the personal evolution in a continuous and integrated process. What once seemed disconnected, trivial decisions, casual encounters, small frustrations, begins to make sense as part of a larger fabric, where each thread connects choices, experiences, and learning. Over time, a sense of internal coherence. It's not about having all the answers or achieving perfection. It's about feeling that there is a conductor connecting decisions, emotions, and actions. This coherence is the result of constant internal listening and the willingness to adjust the direction whenever necessary. Decisions are no longer driven solely by desire to please external expectations and begin to honor their own truth. Even this means following unconventional paths. At this stage, individualization, Jung's central concept ceases to be a distant ideal and becomes a way of being in the world. It is the ability to participate fully in life without lose the internal axis, of opening up to the new without abandoning your roots, of face inevitable uncertainties without getting lost in them. In essence, it is the art of sustain oneself whole amidst the complexities of existence, recognizing that fulfillment does not lie in eliminating shadows, but in dancing with them. As the journey progresses, it becomes evident that the true integration is not limited to reconciliation with individual aspects of the psyche. It also involves a profound repositioning in relation to one's own life. Priorities change. What once seemed urgent loses importance, and what was postponed indefinitely gains central attention. This shift is not the result of an isolated rational decision, but of an organic transformation born of alignment between thought, emotion, and instinct. The relationship with error also transforms. The fear of failure, which so often paralyzed decisions in past, gives way to a genuine curiosity about the learning that each experience offers. Identity is no longer rigidly associated with the ideal of perfection. Instead of seeking constant validation through successes, it is understood that growth occurs both in successes and in failures. A broader vision reduces anxiety in the face of new things and allows you to take risks more freedom. At this point, dialogue with the unconscious ceases to occur only in moments of formal introspection. It infiltrates the simplest situations, in the spontaneous choice of a different way to get home, in a phrase overheard that awakens deep memories in insights that arise for no apparent reason. External and internal life leave of being separate territories and merge into a single, continuous experience, permeated by subtle signals and responses from the unconscious. Relationships also undergo a silent refinement. Living with people who respect the space for mutual growth becomes more valuable. We no longer seek company of those who reinforce old patterns, but of those who stimulate expansion of consciousness. This does not mean surrounding yourself only with like-minded people, but learn to relate to different perspectives without threatening one's own identity. Listening, attentiveness, and authentic dialogue replace the need to always be right. The creativity at this stage ceases to be just artistic production. It becomes in the ability to respond to life in an innovative and appropriate way for each moment. Small daily decisions become creative acts. Reorganize the routine in a healthier way. Transform a difficult conversation into an opportunity for closeness, or find simple gestures to express affection genuinely. This practical creativity is fueled by internal flexibility, the result of reconciliation with parties before denied of oneself. Over time, a deep sense of self also emerges, belonging to the flow of life. The feeling of isolation or disconnection begins to dissolve. Every experience, no matter how trivial it may seem, becomes integrated to a larger fabric in which our actions reverberate far beyond what we achieve measure. This awakens a silent responsibility to live coherently, not just for one's own sake well-being, but with the awareness that each gesture impacts the collective field. The work with symbols takes on an even more active role. Elements that were previously only observed in dreams or moments of synchronicity become consciously incorporated into everyday life, either through visual memories, meaningful objects, or personal rituals. These symbols act as anchors, helping you stay connected to your inner core, even on turbulent days. For Jung, a living relationship with the symbol is one of the most effective ways of maintaining dialogue with the open and fertile unconscious. The understanding of impermanence also deepens. Everything, patterns, emotions, bonds, roles, is in constant movement. This perception reduces resistance to transitions inevitable and helps to welcome both the beginning and the end of cycles, making life more fluid and less marked by fear of the unknown. If this reflection resonates with you and awakens the desire to follow this deep path of self-knowledge, don't forget to subscribe to the Unshakable Mindset channel. Here we go. Continue exploring the intricacies of Psychoanalysis together, discovering ways of living in an integral, authentic and purposeful way. With the advancement of integration, a deeper serenity arises. Accepting impermanence does not mean passivity, but rather being fully present in the moment, understanding that nothing needs to be grasped desperately to have value. Own notion of success is transformed. It is no longer linked only to external achievements and now includes internal metrics, such as the ability to maintain integrity under pressure, cultivate authentic relationships, and respond to challenges without lose balance. These forms of success are silent, rarely celebrated publicly, but they carry real and lasting weight, as are rooted in something that does not depend on the approval of others. As the integration advances, the relationship with the future also changes. Goals cease to be rigid projections and become flexible directions, open to adjustments as new elements arise along the way. This stance reduces attachment to specific results and increases confidence in the process. At the same time, attention to the present intensifies, as it is in the present that real changes occur. The future ceases to be a distant horizon and begins to be seen as the organic continuity of what is being built now, quietly and persistently in small daily actions. At the heart of this phase, there is a deep understanding. The journey is not about reaching a state definitive of completeness, but about living the process consciously, infinite of becoming. Every step, every encounter, every challenge is part of a continuous dance between who we already are and who we are becoming. The beauty of this movement lies precisely in the fact of never being finished, but always expanding. At an advanced stage of journey, the perception of oneself expands, encompassing not only what is conscious or unconscious, but also the way in which we participate in the greater history of humanity. The notion arises that each individual carries in his psychic structure not only personal memories, but also ancestral echoes. Jung called this the collective unconscious, a reservoir of images, patterns, and symbols that are repeated through generations. By recognizing this heritage, the search for self-knowledge ceases to be a task isolated and also becomes an act of reconnection with a symbolic lineage that goes through time. At this point, the inner work begins to include identifying personal myths lived often unconsciously. Each person tends to gravitate towards narratives that shape decisions and perceptions. Some live the myth of the hero in constant battle. Others follow the seeker's plot, which never satisfies. And there are those who see themselves in the role of curator, forgetting themselves. Making these myths conscious allows us to choose whether they still serve the current life purpose or whether they need to be transformed to make room for new stories. The relationship with historical time also changes. When realizing that certain individual struggles and challenges reflect collective patterns, a more holistic view emerges, broad understanding of one's own role in the world. Seemingly personal conflicts, such as difficulty expressing opinions, may reflect a pattern rooted in previous generations. Thus, individual transformation becomes part of a greater transformation. Each person who breaks a cycle weakens the force of this pattern in the collective. At this level, shadow work ceases to be restricted to individual traits and begins to include denied cultural aspects. Observing prejudices, inequalities, and dominant narratives also becomes a way of integrating the collective shadow. Integration, therefore, involves not only internal recognition, but coherent external actions capable of contribute to more conscious and balanced environments. Contact deep with the collective unconscious awakens an even greater sensitivity for universal symbols. Elements such as water, mountains, fire, animals, or mythical figures begin to appear more frequently in dreams and in synchronicities, carrying meanings that cross cultures. Interpreting these symbols personal and contextualized way offers guidance from direct dialogue with the structuring forces of the psyche and not external advice. From then on, personal rituals gain a new value. These are not complex ceremonies or necessarily religious, but with simple gestures that mark the intention conscious of connecting with specific inner aspects or archetypes. Lighting a candle when starting a project, writing letters to parts of yourself that are being integrated, walk in silence at dawn, to reflect about important decisions. Each act becomes a bridge between the inner world and the external. There is also a significant change in the relationship with cycles natural. Observing seasons, moon phases, daily rhythms, and even tides serve as a reminder that everything in life moves in flux. This awareness helps cultivate patience, resilience, acceptance, remembering that growth profound occurs at rhythms that cannot be rushed. If this reflection resonates with you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the Mentalidade Inabavel channel and continue this journey of self-discovery. Each step of self-discovery is not only individual, echoes and silently transforms the world around us. Periods of apparent inactivity, we learn to take advantage of the present's moments of expansion. The recognition that there are times to plant, to grow, harvesting and collecting ceases to be just a metaphor and becomes a living principle that guides choices and decisions. At the same time, the ability to deal with paradoxes is developed without the need to resolve them immediately. This ability that Jung called transcendent function manifests itself in everyday situations, feeling sadness and gratitude simultaneously, recognizing one's own strength while admitting fragility, planning for the future without distancing yourself from the present. Coexistence with opposites stops generating constant anxiety and starts to be perceived as a source of depth and balance. Sense of identity also becomes more flexible. Instead of rigidly clinging to fixed labels or roles, a greater willingness to transition between different aspects of personality as circumstances require. This does not mean inauthenticity, but rather the freedom to express different parts of yourself without feeling like you are betraying an ideal version built to please. This malleability reduces internal conflicts and strengthens authenticity in interactions. With the time, integration reaches a point where the search for external validation loses much of its weight. Actions become guided more by a sense internal coherence than by outside expectations. This independence emotional does not isolate, on the contrary, it allows you to create more genuine connections, built by the mutual choice to share paths and not by the need for approval. The impact of this inner state in everyday life is profound, though not always visible externally. Small changes accumulated over time generate a solid foundation for dealing with unforeseen events, losses, and transformations. Life continues to bring challenges, but the way to face them becomes more centered, less reactive, and more conscious. At this point, the journey's silent self-knowledge ceases to be just an internal job and manifests naturally in every gesture, word, and decision, radiating balance to everything around. As the journey progresses, the perception of the meaning of growth goes through an in-depth review. It is no longer a race to accumulate skills or reach external milestones, becoming a continuous process of refining. Presence. Being fully present becomes more important than accumulating experiences for the sake of quantity. This kind of presence allows you to perceive nuances that were previously invisible. The tone of voice that reveals something unsaid, the body language that reveals an emotional state, the silence that carries more meaning than any word. This refined attention opens space for a rare kind of listening, not just to what others say, but to what life itself is communicating all the time. Unexpected gesture, an unlikely encounter, or a seemingly banal event can carry symbolic messages. Silence, inner noise, allows you to hear the subtle texture that connects all things. With this listening, the concept of purpose also expands. It ceases to be a single and fixed objective and becomes something that is constantly updated, revealing itself in daily choices and in the way we live in the present, and not just in great missions or extraordinary achievements. This understanding takes the weight off need to find the big answer and brings freedom to explore, experience, and adapt. In contact with emotions, there is a change of quality. We no longer seek to avoid discomfort, but to understand it as valuable messengers. Anger points to violated boundaries. Sadness indicates need for withdrawal. Anxiety shows an excess of future invading the present. When listening to these messages without completely identifying with them, the possibility of responding consciously instead of reacting is created automatically. The body once again assumes a central role, becoming not only a vehicle for experiences, but a sensitive radar, capable of immediately registering when something is out of alignment. A short breath signals tension. A relaxation deep indicates acceptance and security. This perception is not born of theories, but from the constant practice of inhabiting one's own body, perceiving it as an ally indispensable in the dialogue with the unconscious. The relationship with the past also transforms. Memories that previously caused pain or resistance become revisited in a new light. Instead of trying to rewrite what happened, the ability to integrate experience as an essential part of the path. This does not mean romanticizing wounds, but recognizing that they shaped strength, sensitivity, and wisdom that exist today. Accept the past with all your imperfections releases energy that was previously trapped in regrets or fantasies about how everything should have been. The future, in turn, ceases to be a territory of pure uncertainty and anxiety, becoming an open field of possibilities. This change does not eliminate the unknown, but transforms the way we relate to it. The focus becomes prepare internally for any scenario, cultivating clarity, adaptability, and resilience, rather than trying to control every detail. Another characteristic of this stage is the strengthening of the relationship with silence. It ceases to be just absence of sound and becomes a fertile space where thoughts settle, emotions calm down, and insights emerge with clarity. Silence is no longer escape and becomes food. Moments of strategic sun allow reorganization internally, the forces, before returning to action in the world. Over time, one realizes that this process is not linear. There will be days of lucidity and days of confusion, moments of opening and moments of retraction. The difference is that this oscillation ceases to be a reason for despair, being accepted as natural part of the psychic life cycle. This understanding allows us to go through periods of shade with serenity, recognizing that they also have a fundamental role in integration. A deeper state of trust then emerges. Not trust naive that everything will turn out as desired, but the mature confidence that it is possible to go through any experience while maintaining integrity. This security is based on experience direct, having already faced internal and external crises and still having found ways to move forward. This phase is not marked by great explosions of conquest, but through a rich solitude that is expressed in the simplest gestures. listening to someone without rushing, taking care of your own inner space, saying yes or no with clarity and without guilt. It is at this point that the journey ceases to be just about finding answers, and it becomes about living the questions with presence and courage. Thank you for staying here, diving into this reflection. Deep. May every word or image that echoed within you serve as a thread of light on your own path of self-knowledge. Remember, true transformation happens in silence, but blossoms in the world when you decide to live in a way whole and authentic. If this content touched something within you, subscribe to continue following this journey. There is much more to explore, symbols to decipher, and conversations that can illuminate forgotten parts of who we are. Come back whenever you need a space to breathe, reflect, and reconnect. Here, each return is a reunion with yourself.